Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are here today to talk about Death on the Nile, which is the 2022 adaptation of the Agatha Christie novel. This is actually the third adaptation of Death on the Nile, I think. The third screen adaptation. There was the 1978 film. I think there was one with David Suchet as well for the TV. This film was meant to come out in what was it? 2019, 2020?
2019-20.
It's been obviously with COVID. This feels it's one of the many films actually that we've had so many trailers for that I kind of felt like I'd already watched the film before it had come out. It's a very, very weird sentiment with it, but of course, directed by Kenneth Branagh. This is a sequel to the 2017 Murder on the Orient Express film, and yeah, it was one that I was kind of looking forward to. And we'll get into sort of our thoughts on Murder on the Orient Express in a minute, but it's going to be a very interesting one to talk about. Certainly, disregarding the film for a second, just from some of the cast members alone, because that's probably definitely going to come up in the conversation, I would imagine. But before we get into it, over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. So comment your thoughts on Death on the Nile. This book is almost 100 years old, so I'm going to be polite and say there shouldn't really be any worries about spoilers. It's against 100-year-old novel. I hadn't read it though. That's going to be something to discuss. But yeah, keep on coming. Hit the like button. Of course, we're working towards some goals. A lot of new releases. The second Branagh film in a month on this channel. Not the better of the two. Not the one that's up for the Oscars too. But he's certainly making his presence well known across this Oscar season. But this one won't be next year. And if you're new to the channel, if you want to know where to follow us, find out what videos are coming next, the best way to do so is on our social medias: Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy, and we have a link to TeePublic in that description below. But as I said, we are talking Death on the Nile, not Belfast. So hard not to even. I mean, you got to bring it Belfast, right? The opening scenes in black and white of this.
Yeah, there's a black and white section in the film. Yeah. For some reason, we'll get into that. I don't quite know why it's in the film, but it's in there.
Whoever was doing the Kenneth Branagh double bill was probably absolutely loving life. They did Belfast first and then this.
Well, you were watching Tenet at home yesterday. So you've had like a triple bill over the last couple of months, really, when it comes to Kenneth Branagh, which is no bad thing because we love Kenneth Branagh on this channel. But
yeah, I put the film on yesterday. I got told off within the opening scene for being too loud, and I just kind of sat there saying, "Well, what do you expect? It's a loud film." Obviously, I'm on the middle floor of our house as well, so everyone below and above has to hear it. And I've got a nice sound set, but I'm not playing that film quietly. That being said, though, yes, we've got a couple of comments ready. Kenneth Branagh has been a very busy man. I mean, he even did Miss Fowl right around the same time this came out. The one that I haven't seen that a lot of people did. Carl, you can see it's being rushed to his best before long. We'll bring up some box office stuff at the end, and I absolutely see that too. Carl will be buzzing with the Newcastle result today, as they look like they're going to be staying up. And yeah, let's talk Orient Express. We must have done a review on the channel for this, so I definitely remember discussing.
Yeah, I think we did. I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah,
off air on, but 2017. Like, I haven't been freaked out by the COVID gaps until we've hit 2022, because in last year I was like, oh, everything was last year, things were normal, but now it's been 2 years. This 22 jump to everything pre-COVID is actually quite scaring me now. Orient Express came out about 4.5 years ago. And it honestly feels like yesterday.
I know.
Because
yeah,
I had a really fun time with that film. Again, I've never read the novel. I've never read a single Agatha Christie thing. I didn't know the premise. I didn't know who was going to get killed. I didn't know who was the suspect and who ended up being the murderer. I'm not going to spoil it in case for some reason you haven't seen that one. You should have. But I had a really fun time with that. There was something about it, kind of felt like a Baz Luhrmann film that was really ultra stylish for something that doesn't need it. But it worked, and it found a way to make itself work. And the cast were pretty much exceptional. They're the best viral marketing campaign of all time. I don't know if you remember the pre-Last Jedi, the Daisy Ridley and Josh Gad's YouTube videos when all that was happening, and that was like free marketing for Orient Express. But when this film was on, I was pretty hyped. I'm not going to lie. Again, so many years ago now, but I love Kenneth Branagh and I liked Orient Express. And I thought, he wants to do another one, so be it. I'll be there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think me and you are like the only defenders of that Murder on the Orient Express film. I haven't heard anyone else talk about that film. I had a really good time with it, and I grew up kind of watching the David Suchet Poirot on TV. I don't know if I ever sat and watched like an episode beginning to end, but it was always on the TV. They made so many of them and like reruns on ITV and everything. So kind of like the world of Agatha Christie, that and Miss Marple was always on in my household. So I was always aware of Murder on the Orient Express. I don't know if I'd ever watched the original film, the Peter Ustinov one. I did watch it, I think, when we did the review for Murder on the Orient Express, because I like comparing and contrasting sort of like different adaptations. But I think I probably watched drips and drabs of it beforehand. But I really liked the 2017 one. I thought it was sort of like a good modern retelling. And you're right, yeah, it was very stylized. Didn't necessarily need to be, but I love Kenneth Branagh, and I thought he played a really good Poirot. The music as well, I remember being really stand out for me as well. The Patrick Doyle soundtrack, which is actually one of my negatives on this one. I love his soundtrack to Murder on the Orient Express, but this one I found a little bit forgettable in the music department. And of course, if you're going to sort of like, reel off the most famous Agatha Christie Poirot books or stories, Murder on the Orient Express is probably number one, and right after that is Death on the Nile at number two. I don't actually know any more by name. I'm sure that I think she wrote like a total of like 40 plus Poirot books, including short stories and everything. So I'm sure he can complete a trilogy, Kenneth Branagh, if he wants to, but I don't know what the next one will be. And of course, when, kind of spoiler alert, I guess, at the end of Murder on the Orient Express, where they said, Poirot, we have a case, you have to come with us immediately. There's a case in Egypt. And you're like, oh, okay. So it's going into Death on the Nile. So I was kind of looking forward to this one. COVID probably, I don't know if I'd be like insanely hyped about Death on the Nile, but I think COVID probably did crush a little bit of the hype that I had going into this one, because, it was like dangling the carrot in front of you, wasn't it? It was like, it's coming out. Oh, no, it's delayed. And then it kind of reached a point where I was like, I don't really care. I'll catch it on streaming sometime or something whenever it comes out. But we got it in the cinema finally. So yeah, that's kind of my preamble. I did watch, not before I went to see this version, but this morning I did watch the original 1978 Peter Ustinov one again to kind of compare and contrast. And I'm not going to do loads of it in this review, just, for some of the key moments, because there are quite a lot of differences with this one, which there are some elements that I like the changes to, some I'm just kind of in between on, and there's a couple which I really don't care about at all, including like the opening origin story, which I thought was kind of pointless. We'll get into that in a second, but yeah, I like Branagh's direction on these things, and he clearly has a love of the character and the source material. Kind of goes without saying, because he wouldn't waste years of his life making adaptations if he didn't. But you can see it through his performance. I think you can see it on screen that he loves this character.
Yeah, and I think we spoke yesterday on chat, and I kind of said to you that I feel that the only reason he took the directing gig is so he can play Poirot as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the reverse Ben Affleck Batman that we spoke about, that we're convinced Affleck took the Batman role to be able to direct one, whereas with this, he's great as Poirot in both films. And I remember because I've never seen him and anything about them. You're like, whoa, that mustache is something.
It's pretty epic.
Sure it was fake calling. Yeah, I'm sure it was fake, but I remember, it is a few years ago now. I think you're right. Bring up COVID really quickly. I feel that, I don't want to keep saying all the Fox films, but there's a reason why the Fox films keep getting buried, right? With COVID and, all these releases that could get put online, but they're not. Looking at you, Kingsman, looking at you, Last Duel, looking at you, West Side Story, looking at you, Death on the Nile. Bit of a follow-up factor as to which streaming service we're all going to end up on as well, who are releasing their other Juggernaut films at the cinemas only. That's the better. But yeah, I think it crushed it. I mean, if you look at Orient Express, it was a decent-sized hit in 2017. They greenlit a sequel straight away. They're impressed with it. I don't think people minded it. And when you're on films like this, you need momentum, right? To come out in 2019, early 2020, that's fine. That's a 2-3 year window. But now we're hitting 4.5, 5 years. We had a pandemic. What sort of shift now the momentum is? I know it's sort of preamble, but the older audiences aren't going to the cinemas. Like, it's obviously fine for us. We love going to the cinema. It's fine for you guys commenting as well. You obviously invest in film to be on our channels and stuff. But the target demographic for a Poirot film, I would say, is 40 plus.
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
is the demographic that is not going to the cinemas at the moment, unless it is this juggernaut. I think Bond, I'd honestly say, is the only one that has hit that age group perfectly with post-COVID. That's whereas obviously the younger ones haven't been as invested in Bond, which is a different conversation. Look at Spider-Man's box office, but I think there's been this whole launch of dramas to age of that demographic that have all bombed, and it's quite interesting that also with this older audience, they're moving more onto streaming services, onto dramas. They can press pause and all that kind of stuff. And I think we're going to see a really sad shift momentum in the next 5 years of cinema releases where certain demographics aren't going to get films made for them. They'll just be designated for streaming services, which is fine sometimes. But I would like to see a film like this. I don't mind seeing these kind of films. And I would say it has got a big budget for probably that demographic too, which doesn't have. I think it's a 90 mil budget or something like that. It's definitely not going to make that back. But the film itself, someone outsider to it, even hype heading into it, it became a meme before it came out, right? We have to talk about the champagne line. It's in the description.
Yeah.
If you're on Twitter, you'd have seen it over the last 3 weeks. With COVID, I know we've had this chat, right? The same trailers were played on loop for however many months. Top Gun for ages, Wonder Woman for ages, then Bond for ages, and we just kept getting the same trailers on loop and loop. And this is one of the ones that came before Corona. I feel like I'd already seen this trailer, and the last 2 months it's been. I think West Side Story is the first time I got this at the cinema, and I was like, "Well, that's a really bad taken line." And then I said another film. I was like, I keep getting the same line now, and it feels like a trailer line. And then it became a bit of a cultural phenomenon on Twitter, and it's weird. I've never dissected a line for a film before, but and enough champagne to fill the Nile is going to be a line I think forever known amongst film fans. We'll get into characters in a bit, but there are. I'm going to be blunt and say there's a few performances I didn't care for in this, and there are certainly controversies aside outside of film. There are 2 performances which are the worst, which just happen to be people having dramas outside of film at the moment. Reminds me a bit like West Side Story. I know you've not seen the new one yet, but the worst performance in it is genuinely the paedophile. It's as simple as that. It's not me being horrible.
Allegedly, do we have to still say allegedly, or is it confirmed now? I don't know. I don't know where we stand legally on that.
I know that Rachel Zegler and followed him, blocked him for everything after they finished marketing, which is quite funny. But it's just a coincidence. But yeah, we'll get into them. Champagne on the Nile. I know you discovered the proper memes last night, didn't you, for the first time?
Yeah. So, I mean, this line, I discovered it. Was it yesterday? You sent me the link to it. It was amazing. I do remember it in the trailer though, distinctly, but I didn't realize that it kind of had this. I'm not going to say cultural phenomenon, but there's an audience for that line. It has reached meme territory, and Gal Gadot.
For you. Do you remember We All Have Our Secrets? That was the one you would go for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that achieved meme status, but it was just the one that got on my tits after a while after seeing the trailer for God knows how many times. But I mean, Gal Gadot as an actress, she's pretty much there for the image. Not to take too much away from her, she's fine, but there are times where she's genuinely bloody awful in some of her line delivery, and you can see that as Wonder Woman, and especially you can see it in this as well. I mean, it's without even getting into the plot of this thing, the film contains a Zionist and a cannibal, and that's not even the murder mystery of the film itself. That's just the actors. That's the cast that we've got to work with in this thing. So there was an underlying weird sense to seeing some of these actors on screen, knowing the things that we know now. And I mean, we wouldn't have known this by the time that this film was originally meant to come out, but we do now. So we kind of have the benefit of hindsight, and I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable, and I don't usually get like that with a lot of films. Usually I can distance the character, the art that is on screen and the real life thing, but I found it really wildly distracting.
Is it because there's a lot of dry humping between the two of them?
There's a lot of dirty dancing going on for a good 10 minutes at the start of this film.
This is where it kind of hit me, right? So the Gal Gadot stuff, you mentioned, actually, I think originally she was a personal trainer before an actress. And I think Fast Forward was the first thing I saw. And it wasn't even called Fast Forward back then. But action-wise, she's fine for action. She's got images, said she's a PT, all that kind of stuff. And it's when, look at Wonder Woman 1, right? It was like a fish out of water type film, and that sort of awkward delivery worked really well. Then you get to Wonder Woman 2, and no. Kal-El, no, not at all. This is the film for me, which I think if they'd have recast it tomorrow, should be probably the second one out, because you got to think 2019, Wonder Woman 1 has just been out, 2 is just finished filming, and there's still a lot of hype on that. And I can see getting these bigger roles now. One thing that's really annoying me about this film as well, I've got to bring it up, the Cleopatra stuff, because she has been cast to play Cleopatra 2.
And I'm of course, yeah.
And I'm like, was she cast before she filmed this film and made loads of references? Was it after this film? And COVID really took its toll with that. But
I mean, if that's her audition piece from this film as Cleopatra, then I pass. Like, they
Yeah,
need to get someone else.
I mean, I know Patty Jenkins already stepped down from it, which is the first big sign. But
Is it Angelina Jolie, if I remember rightly, tied to it for a while? I can't. It
maybe
rings a bell. It definitely rings a
it's
bell. Yeah.
it's one of those films that's been in passing for so. I don't think it'll ever see the light of day. I think it's got close as it ever will, but I don't think it can now. But
Hmm.
going off these two, I don't believe they're romance. Arnie Hammer's such a weird one because he was almost Batman, so we're bloody thankful that we're not talking about
Hmm.
Batman being a cannibal for the next few weeks before that film comes out. Warner Bros. Will be shitting it. But I really struggled with him in this film. And I don't think he had a bad performance. I think it was genuinely because of what we know now. And it's weird because I don't really get at this. Like, if I watch Seven tomorrow, Kevin Spacey would show up and I'd go, oh, pedo. But then you're like, he's a very he's a very good actor. His
Yeah,
actions
he
sort
is.
of were really like his actions outside of cinema kind of reflect his on-screen presence.
Yeah.
That sounds really
Yeah.
awful out of context. Like, there's always been something off about him, and then when the stuff came out outside of it, you got that vibe to it, right? It hit you like, dung, it's dropped. And with Arnie Hammer in this, it's kind of like, I thought you were just an incredibly average actor before, but now we all know you're a cannibal. Your performances have different meaning, and like when he's up in someone's face or when he's like shouting, I'm just expecting him to bite someone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
It's
what I
so
was
bad.
like. Yeah.
It's so bad, but it's like I think it's something that's got so out of context that it's impossible not to see it. And the whole Gal Gadot thing with Nazan is like, I fully like obviously disagree with her and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't take me out of the film. The terrible performance does. But with Armie Hammer, I'm like, cannibal. Like, I've never seen a cannibal before. Like, it's so weird. But because his character's obviously a bit of a creep and he's like a villain in it, I guess you could say, and you always know there's something off about him, that just adds to it. And this whole film kind of feels like a meme. And if I'm going to really quickly bring up Letitia Wright, I thought she was good in this. And, the whole anti-vaccine or the Marvel drama, I didn't have that every time she appeared on screen. I was like, fucking idiot or something like that. I thought she was one of the better people in this film. Whereas Armie Hammer and Gal Gadot, it's like, oh, no, your controversies are too much now.
And
again,
they're like the main characters, aren't they,
main...
as well in the film? So it's not even like they're supporting; they are like what the story is about inherently. I will say, kind of overall, the cast was fine, but it didn't feel as strong as the lineup they had for Murder on the Orient Express. I mean, in that one you had, Johnny Depp, who I thought was great. You Defoe, Judi Dench, Derek Jacobi, I think was in it as well. You had like your good, your prolific kind of actors in there. And then you had some newcomers with, like Josh Gad and Daisy Ridley and everything. Michelle Pfeiffer, I thought, was wonderful in it as well. The cast was so strong to that other one, whereas this one, they were just kind of fine. They were kind of serviceable, or I never really got a good sense of their character, because it is such a huge ensemble. It is a murder mystery, with all these different culprits. And the runtime that they had, I felt like they didn't really, I never really got a good sense of anyone, or, characters will just disappear off screen and will literally just be in the background. I never really got much banter or back and forth with all of them interacting with each other so much. And, maybe you could argue that that's a fault of Death on the Nile, but having seen the 78 one, I do think that film, you do get a better sense of all of the characters and kind of the key players. Whereas this one, I don't know. I never really got that. You've got Rose Leslie, for example, who just kind of, she's there and then disappears out of a lot of it. And I kept forgetting she was in the film. And then, there's quite a big pivotal moment in the film. And I was like, oh, that's right, she is in this. I kind of forgotten about her character. Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders, one of the best sort of like comedy duos in comedy history, really. It's great to see them together, but I felt like they never really did much, or I never got really like a sense of comedic personality out of them or anything like that. So I don't know. And like Russell Brand as well, who can play like it was just Russell Brand was just there as a doctor character. I don't know if I'm way off base on that one. I think definitely is sort of like the strongest players for me in the film. Kenneth Branagh goes without saying, is wonderful, having fun with the character. I really like Tom Bateman's character, who continues over from the Murder on the Orient Express film, who's kind of his friend. They rework a character from the original book, like the 78 film, and I think they've repurposed that character in order to bring his character back in. But I think that adds a lot more emotion, and because you've got that continuation from the previous film, this being kind of a direct sequel to that Murder on the Orient Express film, it was a nice continuation, I thought, to have that character come back. So I'm fine with that. And I actually really liked Emma Mackey's character.
Yeah.
And she plays like completely cartoonishly, but I love characters like that. The kind of jaded ex, the shunned lover kind of thing. And she is psycho. She's a complete nutcase. And I got that from her performance, and it looked like she was having a lot of fun with it. She did look really familiar, and I did check to see if I've seen her in anything, but I think she looks like a relative newcomer, in all honesty. I know she's been in Sex Education, but it's a show I've never watched, so maybe she just got one of those faces, but I don't know. I kind of got a kick out of her performance as the crazy ex-lover kind of thing. I thought she played it well.
No, I think you're right. I think of the non-Poirot, she's the best, and I hate the term got the script, but not got the script. Sorry, what's it called? Got the not. I don't know. Whatever the term is for when they like know the protocol brief, whatever they want to call it. But I think that's why she works, because she feels anyone like not zany enough, but she feels like the only one that can match Kenneth Branagh. Like they're both so over the top on caricatures that because it's so boosted up, it works. Whereas some of them are approaching this film as like a drama, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But like it's the whole Fast and I always go back to this: the Fast and Furious Shakespeare, the Rock Vin Diesel thing. To Vin Diesel, this is his Shakespeare. To The Rock, it's a load of fun. To some of these cast, I think they went for the Shakespeare route for this film, whereas a lot of the others, including the director, I feel like they knew that this is mental. Let's go all out. Let's go over the top. This is a film where someone's mustache got an origin story. Okay, let's get.
We need to talk about that.
Yeah. All seriousness out of it, a mustache has an origin story, opening scene, prologue, whatever you want to call it. Shot in black and white, shot really well as well. That's the other thing. Action even looked great, and it all ends that we have a horrifically de-aged Kenneth Branagh. I really struggled to cope with it. It reminded me of like it's like they scanned the chamber sequence and got it wrong or something. But his Capitan, it goes on a tripwire, but his Capitan was the original mustache man, and that is how he grew the idea. And like Batman, he wears the mustache to hide his true identity.
Yeah.
Which
and like Batman, it's basically the Two-Face scene from The Dark Knight, isn't it? In the hospital bed.
Yeah, and the nurse, his fiance, is played by someone from Alan Partridge, which I laughed at because it's
that's amazing.
But yeah, I mean, Carl, I found the CGI AVs, it looked fake. 100%, I'm with you on
That's
this.
one of my biggest criticisms of the film, actually. I was going to come on to that for issues.
Yeah.
Wildly distracting. At every scene, you could tell that they were on a green screen. It looked really bad. The lighting of the actors in the foreground compared to the background, it looked really garish and digital, because it was, I didn't for a second believe anyone was on location. Even like the 78 one, you look at it and a lot of that was probably sets and stuff, but it looks like they did shoot some stuff in Egypt, and it looks really good, and everything looks where it needs to be. There's moments where and I don't know if this is taking a book like, Death on the Nile or an Agatha Christie product and trying to package it and market it for a modern audience and modern standpoint. That must be a tough thing to follow, because in my head, it is a very archaic's a little bit too oldie worldy, but it is quite an old-fashioned thing. You mentioned like the demographic and everything. Even when you watch David Suchet and everything, it's a period piece. It is difficult to market that to a teenage or 20-something audience. It is. And it felt like they try and go out their way. And you could maybe argue this with Murder on the Orient Express as well. They action it up in some parts. There's, CGI, and there's big like set pieces. But this one felt really distracting with the CGI. And it just wasn't a pleasant looking film, like from cinematography or anything like that. And there's moments as well where I'm like, well, why did you put that in the film? Why did you need to show that in terms of a visual?
Hooks and stuff like that. And
it's like you'll get this panning shot of this digital landscape of the Nile in Egypt, and then you'll get like a CGI alligator that just jumps out of the water and snacks on a bird. And I'm like, well, why do you need to show that? There's probably one of the worst bits of CGI I've seen in a long time. This CGI snake tries to attack a character, and there's this really awkward editing where Poirot with his cane light stops. It just looks terrible. I'm like, well, why did you need to? Completely pointless. You don't need to show that in the film. And speaking of pointless, just cycling it back to the beginning of the film, I just get the impression that Kenneth Branagh really wanted to make a World War film. And as
It's
you
probably
said,
off the back of Dunkirk as
yeah,
well. Like,
it looks great. Like if he chose like for his next project was like, I'm going to make a film that's set in World War One. I'm like, hey, power to you. It looks great. If this is your audition piece for it, it looks great. But it reminded me of Solo, you know, where we get the name drop, where we get the origin story for Han Solo's name. Why do we need this? Completely pointless. It's got nothing to do with Death on the Nile. As far as I know, I don't think it's taken from any like backstory of Poirot or Agatha Christie. Maybe he served in the war, maybe there's a throwaway line there, but to the lengths it goes to. And also just the continuity. When he's in that hospital bed, he does the whole Two-Face thing where he turns. His entire side of his face is annihilated.
A mustache wasn't going to cover it up.
No.
It's like up to here.
Yeah, he's got a dead eye. Like he's blind in this eye. It's like grayed, like glazed over. His entire cheek is obliterated. It all goes under his lip as well. And she's like, "Oh yeah, you can grow a mustache." And then you see him in Murder on the Orient Express, and the rest of this film, there's not a scar on his cheek. He's got perfectly working eyes, and then there's like a kind of bookend, kind of spoiler.
He's got his Joker at the police thing, hasn't he? Where it's just like a little cut of the side of him.
At the end, he goes clean shaven, and I guess there's a bookend to that. But it's, what are you trying to tell with this information? It's got no thematic sense to it. You know, there's a little bit of like a lost love story, I guess, but you can throw that in a line of dialogue. You didn't need to have this whole elaborate flashback. It just felt really over the top. Again, a ploy to try and action it up to make it more relevant. Maybe it was pointless. You said yourself, you walked in, you thought you'd walked into the wrong film. You thought you'd walked into a different screen other than Death on the Nile.
If I didn't know it's Death on the Nile, and you'd have opened this, it's like, oh, am I in Belfast? Like, or have I stumbled? Well, ironically, there's a comparison to Uncharted because that is a double bill. That I did Death on the Nile first, Uncharted second.
Mm-hmm.
Both these films with awful overused CGI. At least say about this CGI that at least you can see who's in the frame. But the one thing I was confused if it was indefinite, because you said about so many pointless CGI moments, right? It must have been Uncharted. They do the whole Indiana Jones red dot on the map, but it's a 3D CGI aeroplane going over a 3D map with a 3D red circle and 3D red to planet. And it might as well have been in Death on the Nile, but that one was Uncharted I was thinking of. Quick comment, Martin. There's nothing worse than bad CGI to ruin a film, and this is it because I did enjoy this film. It's nowhere near as good as Murder on the Orient Express, but when they bump off the first character and it really gets into gear. To me, it really picked up the paces. Now, I feel a bit spoiled. I'm going to bring up a film, not the Rian Johnson film you're thinking of, Chris, the other one, Knives Out. Yeah. We had Knives Out in 2019, right? And I know you weren't as keen on it as I was.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was fine, but I probably didn't like it to the same level that you and Tate did. Yeah,
because that's been the first new murder mystery film in however long. It was modern day. It was tailored. A lot of young audiences went to that. That was a massive hit for COVID. Pre-COVID, sorry, massive hit for that genre type thing. New story, new this. I feel like I've subconsciously got some slight expectation of Death on the Nile because I really enjoyed Orient Express. I really enjoyed Knives Out. I kind of thought this is a bit level now. Knives Out's way above Murder on the Orient Express as far as I'm concerned. But have I been spoilt with another really good mystery film that I don't know if it's up the stakes in my head? Because Knives Out 2's come out this year. And akin to this one's cast hasn't hit me personally. You know, when the first one had a sublime cast, they don't compare to this. This one's way below. And looking at Knives Out again, Knives Out 1, superb cast. Knives Out 2 later this year has an unbelievable cast as well. And I just kind of feel that I'm sort of subconsciously on treads of this, but what Knives Out did, it felt, the writing felt perfect. And I feel that the writings are struggling this, that, you know, the fact that you know who's going to get murdered, that's fine. These films, that is how it's meant to be. You need to know who's going to get killed, why they're going to get killed, what the issues are. But the build up to it, the moment it happens, it could have all been choreographed as easy as 1, 2, 3, you know. And maybe it's because Agatha Christie books have been out for however many decades, they've influenced so many other genres that I also subconsciously might think of these moments. And I just feel like there was something really missing to get this film going, and it took too long. And I wasn't invested when it did get going. But is it because I've seen better stuff? Is it because I've seen this maybe done before in different ways? I'm really perplexed by it. Or is it because simply I didn't care for the cast? I didn't care who killed who. But you get these really weird moments like, okay, we found Gal Gadot's body. Oh, we have to put her in with the ham in the fridge. And Like not the whole Robert De Niro "Are you laughing" meme from Joker, but it's like, is that meant to be funny, or is it just like a terribly like written on and delivered line? And it's little things like that that kind of lost me. And I think there's so many like meandering things that happen throughout. Although I still am invested, I feel like I'm invested in the story, not necessarily this film, if you could even say that.
Yeah, and I mean, this was one of those films where I knew who the culprit was beforehand. I'm not going to give away who did it, but it was interesting to still see it play out, and what they were changing, and there were a lot of changes to it as well. Having seen the original and even just doing a little bit of reading there, it looks like even the '78 one did sort of like combine characters or enlarge certain characters' roles. I think they even cut out some characters, so maybe the ensemble in the book is even bigger than we even get in any of the films. But there were a lot of additions to this, which I didn't remember from being, in that original film, because I think I watched bits and pieces of the '78 one. I think I watched bits and pieces of the David Suchet one as well whenever it came out, early 2000s, mid 2000s. For example, in this film, you've got the blues singer. Is it Salome Otterborn? I think it is. The whole jazz thing, the whole jazz singer thing, that's not in the original. In the '78 film, she's played by Angela Lansbury, who I think's always been old. Even watching this film from 1978, Maggie Smith's in it as well. And I swear to God, those two actresses have always been old in every single thing that I've seen them in. They've always been the same age. So this film kind of delves into, it doesn't go like mad overboard, but kind of like racial stereotypes and everything, and prejudices maybe. You've got Tom Bateman's character, who's obviously been brought over from the previous film into this, where there's like a forbidden love story and he's seeking his mother's approval, and none of that's in the book as far as I know, and it's certainly not in the original film. I didn't think it was out of place though. I thought it was fine, and it still hits the story beats. There's a moment in the film where someone gets killed, and it's quite an emotional moment. For this film, that character was switched out in this film from what it is in previous versions, because I think it just naturally makes it more emotional and has a little bit more impact than perhaps it would if it was the character that it should be. So it's just the sake of adaptation, isn't it? You've got to chop and change it. Did they need a whole forbidden love story in there? Probably not. It's the film already kind of deals with love as like the backdrop of it, and the lengths that people can go to for it. But nothing kind of stuck out to me, even kind of only having like a vague knowledge of the original film. Nothing really kind of stood out to me as being like, oh, well, why is this in the film? Apart from the intro origin story, as we mentioned with that. It was honestly just, if I'm going to kind of go towards my final thoughts, my negatives are just some of the cast didn't really have much of an impact on me. And I don't know if that's where the film chose to keep its screen time. If you did cut out some of those additions and focus it on some of the other characters and flesh them out more, would I have got a better sense of the ensemble maybe and the characters? There are other bits they throw in as well with like Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders, who's played by, I think, Maggie Smith and Betty Davis, I think, respectively, in the 1978 film. They kind of add like a lesbian relationship, or they pretty much, well, I won't even say they hint at it, they pretty much tell you in this film that they're an item together. That's not in the original, so that's something they've added in too. So I think it's mostly just down to the cast for me. There are some pretty piss poor performances, as we mentioned, from Gal Gadot, but that kind of goes without saying. But honestly, I think the visuals were a big thing with me on this one. And I know that Murder on the Orient Express had a lot of CGIs, I've already mentioned, and some action set pieces which weren't in the original, as a chance to kind of make it a bit more exhilarating, probably for a more contemporary audience. But this one did get distracting. And I think if you are doing a period piece, not to say that you can't use CGI, of course you can, but it should be used sparingly. And I think every single scene in this, I knew that they were on a soundstage. I knew that they were in front of a green screen, and it would just look really garish and kind of ugly and in your face and really fakey fake, more than a lot of films I see, actually. So that kind of did take me out of the immersion, I think, because I could just see that everyone was in front of a green screen. They're probably my biggest issues that I have with it. I don't think it's a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. I do prefer Murder on the Orient Express. I think that's a more solid film. As another kind of negative, I thought the soundtrack was quite forgettable as well. Patrick Doyle is a fantastic composer, as I mentioned. I love the Murder on the Orient Express soundtrack. I think there's a track on that one called Justice, and then there's kind of the tunes used in the end credits song, it's like a lullaby that's sung by Michelle Pfeiffer, and I remember it being quite an emotional piece of music. It really hit me, and I really enjoy it. This one, I couldn't tell you any piece of music. And I imagine that it probably was Patrick Doyle, because I know that Kenneth Branagh's used him a number of times. I think he used him on Thor, didn't he, as well? So yeah, it didn't quite. Yeah, it didn't quite have an impact on me. I thought it was fine. I think it's just average to me. You know, as a murder mystery, I mean, you were a newcomer to it, so were you kind of wrapped up in the mystery? Did it keep you engaged throughout the film, or?
This is kind of how I feel right now. Like the CGI is just really fascinating thing, and I've really wanted to bring comment by Carl and Martin. I'm surprised directors like Branagh would let it slip. Doing a budget on tour is not an excuse. Here's my thing:
fair.
You're adapting Death of the Nile. You're going to do a film set on a boat. A film set on a boat. Don't make a film set on a boat if you can't actually make a film set on a boat.
And there's close-ups where like the boat turns in the water, and it looks terrible, doesn't it? It looks really bad.
It doesn't help. I watched Tenet last night. Yes, that's a 250 million blockbuster, whatever. There's a giant yacht in the film, and it's set pieces, and it's in frame, and it's stunts, and this again. If you're going to choose to set your film on a boat, I think you should at least film it on a boat in a river. That's not awful CGI, and that's where I really struggle, because it doesn't ruin the film, right? And as the mystery goes, this is where my kind of issue stems. I remember on Orient Express, I think everyone could have been the murderer, and that's how it went. That's how it went. They all were. It was a joint effort. Well done. Really enjoyed that, and it doesn't stick to formulas. It wasn't like aha, it was all of them. It was generally like, oh no, like everything clicked. It worked. And even with Poirot in that, he lets them go, doesn't he? And I love that kind of logic with it. And in this one, this is where I feel lost, because I never felt like they were actually any other suspects than who they were, because it's like...
Yeah, it's quite obvious, isn't it? Yeah.
Here's a character we're going to introduce. So Dawn French, there's a scene. Oh, we're going to lead to the flat out. Dawn French walks out of frame. She's angry. That'll make her a suspect. Has interview system. This is why I'm angry. It's because of this and this. Okay. And it felt predictable, because every single character had one moment leading up to the murder where it could have been them, and that had a payoff in the interviews. And this is where I feel a bit lost with the murder mystery, because of course they're all going to have a reason to kill them. That's the point of these films, right? But why was it so blatantly telegraphed as a really obvious moment? It didn't have to be as obvious as they were. And, you know, it's something where I sort of struggled with in that respect. That if that's how the book is, or the original, that's absolutely fine. I understand that, but I just never felt like it was anyone other than the main two or main one. And again, is it also because over the course of the decade since this, so many films have adapted that kind of murder or that mystery aesthetic? I'm not sure. And I said the mystery worked for me, but to me, I was more invested in another character. I was invested in someone else's death other than the one you meant to. And I guess everyone would be at home. It made sense story-wise. There was time put aside to develop that character, unlike the other. So it's a weird one. But I didn't mind it. And even when, you know, you get the final scenes and all this, I didn't mind how they did it. I just think that the execution on the stuff, and I've seen a lot of people saying, of course, it's predictable, it's 100 years old. It's not the point. If you're trying to sell it to a newer audience who might not be familiar with it, you know, don't have you won't sign my papers and I'm your lawyer. That's surely going to give me a reason to try and kill you. And it's so telegraphed. Everyone's got a big moment to have had the reason to kill them, and that's where I'm lost with it. I don't know.
That's kind of in the original as well. It might not be as telegraphed as in this film, granted, but that is the nature of a lot of Agatha Christie things, that everyone's a suspect. And
I think it's how blatant it is in this. Like it's too. I feel like it's too blatant. Whereas again, maybe because Orient Express is the ending it has. You'd get shots of them and actually Carl's put a really good comment here, which actually a question I have. If I know the cast could be set on the same time, that's how I feel. Because I remember a lot of Orient Express, you'd have so many different characters interacting with one another. Whereas this felt like, let's keep these two here, these two there, them two there. We'll bring you all together for the final scene, but no other scenes bar that. Whereas the other one, you'd have interactions elsewhere and everywhere. And ironically, technically, it should be smaller because it's on the train, right? So there's a couple of things I don't think worked, and I'm just trying to work out why that is.
I think it might just be my personal bias as well, in that I think that just out of the two, Murder on the Orient Express is much more interesting out of the two stories. I know that kind of goes neither here nor there, because that's just down to basic principles. Some people could prefer Death on the Nile, of course they could, but yeah, even going into it knowing who the killers were, or having a pretty good idea, like it was always in the back of my mind. There was something specifically that happens at the end that had stuck with me. I remembered kind of how it all came to at the end. And I remember the scene where like this giant breeze block gets pushed off a ledge to try and kill a couple of characters, which of course in this version was really actioned up. And it was like this huge moment, whereas in the other version, it's just like a breeze block's just pushed off the edge. Felt like, they went really out of their way to make it a huge moment in this. But yeah, there was one moment particularly, and it was quite telling in some of the camera angles and some of the shots that it chose to linger on. Without going into spoilers, there's a moment including a handkerchief being applied to a wound that, even though I couldn't remember all the specifics, even watching this new one, I was watching it going, that looks kind of shifty there, how it's focused on that. And then it all kind of clicked into place for me. So yeah, and we've got comments coming in as well. It was just too predictable, which I agree with. Wagner says, hot take, but I hate the ending of Orient Express. Ooh. I seem to remember you, George, as well. Did you mention that you're not too keen on the whole? I mean, I guess spoiler alert for Murder on the Orient Express. Everyone did it.
Looking back now, I can't remember what I said at the time, so if it was the opposite, but I didn't mind it all. Looking back in retrospect, I actually quite enjoyed that film.
Yeah.
I've not seen it since. And I was debating watching it before this, but I'm glad I didn't, because I'd have enjoyed the one more. But I didn't mind it. I can understand why some would see it as a cop-out. But I just remember being invested in all their reasons why it kind of made sense. And Poirot's action was obviously that it was the one crime he let go, basically, didn't he? Mm-hmm. And I didn't mind that kind of concepts.
And I don't know how many novels had come out before that point. So I don't know if up until that point, a lot of Agatha Christie's novels with Poirot, it was always one killer. It was always one culprit. And then maybe if that one came out and it was a big one, it's like, oh, shocker, everyone did it. I don't know if Murder on the Orient Express was always the first novel, if she opened with that one, if there was a bunch of stuff before, because if there was a bunch of stuff before, then I can imagine that book and that ending would have been quite shocking, I guess, and quite different in what had come before. But I don't know. I haven't read any of the books, so I don't know how accurate it is. We've also got here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Built strong case for everyone. Couldn't I do so? Script was all of them. The cop ending. I said that's obviously murder.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I'm gonna. We're heading into our final thoughts. I don't know if we've got much else to say. I'm not gonna. This is going to be on Disney Plus in 6 weeks. I guarantee you. The whole 42-day streaming law. This isn't going to be a film where they're past the 40 days. Think, we'll give it an extra few weeks to cinema, or we'll make people wait longer. Whereas West Side Story is coming on March the 2nd. They've just announced, because they timed it right with the Oscars, with the BAFTAs, all that. Mm-hmm. This is going to be like Kingsman. Can we get it up? Yep, day one. Let's go. So personally, I'd hold out till then. If I'm going to be honest, there's not too many good films out of the cinema right now that are non-Oscar films. Actually, is probably worth adding, because there are some great Oscar films out of the cinema. A certain other film. I want to leave on a statistic, Chris, because as I said, I'm just going to say it's average. It's just as applies as average. If you're familiar with the source material, you'll know what to expect. You might like the execution of it. If you like Kenneth Branagh, then by all means go. But there is a better Kenneth Branagh film out there for you to pick to watch instead. It would take, right, 79.2 billion gallons of champagne to fill the Nile. Scientists have discovered it. I'd wanted to see if someone had done it, and I'm glad someone had done it this week. So
I love the internet. I love people. It's things like that give me faith in humanity. It really is. That's brilliant. Yeah, if I'm going into final thoughts, I agree completely with you. I think it's a very average film. It's not a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not coming out kicking and screaming. They've completely bastardized Death on the Nile or anything like that. It's fine. I think there's enough there to kind of keep you hooked. There's like a little bit of intrigue there. My faults do come with the over-reliance on CGI, which I do think is wildly distracting and just all round pretty bad, in all honesty. And some of the performances, I don't really feel a lot of the characters got time to shine. And as great point there, with Murder on the Orient Express, you had groups of people interacting, and it felt more, it felt more of like a community. It felt more of an ensemble, essentially, which is the main thing that you want. Could I go for like a third Kenneth Branagh Poirot film, sure. Like I'd watch another one if it came out. I don't think it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I love seeing Kenneth Branagh as this character. He's having fun. It's always interesting to see his films as well. He's quite a very versatile director. I'll say that. If you look at his body of work, he can go from the really bloody awful, which I haven't seen and I don't intend on watching it either, which might make me a terrible critic, and that's fine. But was it Artemis Fowl? Was that it? I ain't watching it. You go to Belfast, which, we've talked about on Oscar predictions. We absolutely loved. You've got Thor, which is your blockbuster. And then you've kind of got these weird in between ones as well. So I'd watch another one. But I think out of the two films at the cinema at the moment, I mean, I haven't seen Uncharted, so I can't vouch for whichever film is better. Ooh. Judging by what I've seen, I'd probably say Death on the Nile, maybe. Yeah. But I don't think you're missing anything by not seeing this on a big screen. If you want to wait until this hits streaming and you decide to watch it there, it's small scale enough. I don't think you'll get like a big screen experience from it. This exhilarating cinematic masterpiece that is Death on the Nile. I think out of the two films out at the moment, I guess you'd probably get more on a big screen out of Uncharted, just because it's a bigger, louder, action-packed film. So if you're not too fussed about this and you want to wait till it comes out on streaming, just wait till it comes out on there. But I think it's worth checking out. It's fine. As you said, there's not really much out at the moment, so you pick and choose with what you can, really.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of feel that it depends what you want from a film, and I guess in Uncharted you can say does the action set pieces one action set piece better than this other big one, but definitely. Now I said it all depends on your taste. If you don't like murder films, obviously this isn't the film for you. But as I said, the Branagh hype is there, but we're in a very dry few weeks. I mean, Spider-Man's at the cinemas. Don't know for how much longer. We've got some other big films out. I feel like we've missed something from last week or two that we've covered. I honestly don't know. There's been so much stuff happening, but I feel like there's a big film out of the cinemas right now, but there probably isn't, and I'm really confused in my head. So I'm going to
the new Jim Broadbent film coming out. Was it The Duke?
The Duke. That looks all right. I want to watch that. It looks all right, and probably not. And here we go. Not that film needs to bomb or anything, but if you go to that kind of film on 2:00 on a Friday, not that I could because of work, if you didn't have a whole room full of older people, then you definitely know they're not coming back to the cinema anytime soon, because that is a prime film for that age group. And I kind of like the look of it, but that's the kind of film that would be very popular at home. Carl says the answer. Everyone is waiting for it. I think it's because I booked my Batman tickets. That's probably why. Jackass, obviously, as well.
I will say, like, my local Odeon have so many screenings on for Batman that night. I think there's like 6 midnight screenings. It's ridiculous. And I hope it has the turnout, because I don't know what general consensus is at the moment. I think Batman fans are really looking forward to it, but hearing some, whispers, as I mentioned, seeing the trailers, hearing the whisperings of some of the people in the crowd, I don't know if the hype's there. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's packed on the night, but I guess we'll have to see.
I was the youngest there by decades.
Yeah,
if Ed was by us, we'd probably have to say the same thing too. That's how I feel. But yeah, I want to hear from you guys. I've appreciated everyone commenting today, but do keep them coming. If you're watching this after, if you have seen this film, let us know your thoughts. Definitely, do hit the like button, do comment, do subscribe. As I said, Knives Out 2 is going to be out this year. Hopefully, Netflix don't just have it on Netflix. Hopefully, they put it at the cinemas as they should. But I guess that'll be the only other murder mystery film. Oh no, what's the Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston one? Is it like Murder Mystery? Is that literally the name of the film on Netflix? They're doing a sequel to that too.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Maybe the mystery films are coming back. Who knows? We're not getting a new Scooby-Doo anytime soon either. But if you want to find out what videos are coming up, what is next, social media is always a good way to find us. Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. Chris, we mentioned there is a Batman film coming out in 3 weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks now, I think. Yeah.
Let's tell people about our tier list video, shall we? So on Friday, we were joined by Neil for an incredibly fun tier list video on Batman and Allies, I think is the title on YouTube, but we still can't get over it.
We're working on it.
To simplify things, this Friday, there's going to be a video going up for essentially the Batman villains we've seen on screen. We haven't recorded it yet, but how are we thinking for that? Are you excited to talk all the villains from Batman films?
I mean, I can't wait. Any chance that I get to talk about Batman, and especially his Rogues Gallery, is just a good evening to me. I mean, the last one that we did was clocked in about 2.5 hours. It was a great discussion, though. It's a big video, so if you haven't checked it out, be prepared. It is 2.5 hours long, but Yeah, you know, the tier list is still something we're very new to. We did the James Bond one, you know, the Batman one was our second one, and we wanted to double down. They're just fun to make. It's something a bit
Yeah.
different, and the villains is going to be hilarious. It's going to be so wide open as well, right? Because you have your Heath Ledgers, for example, or your Joaquin Phoenixes,
Your Jared
and
Leto's.
then you have well, exactly. You have your Jared Leto's, and then you have your wild card in there, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. So we're going through all of the theatrical villains, and we're going to be ranking them accordingly. It's a tier list video. I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait for that one. So we're going to be recording that on Tuesday, but you can expect to see that on Friday. We're going to be shooting for Batman content every Friday until the new film comes out.
Yeah, and as I said, the Batman, there's literally like I don't think maybe one or two of the films come out in March. They're all afraid, and they've got a reason to be because it is the Batman. And it's rated 15 over here in the UK, which is great. Although Venom 2 was for some reason, but PG-13 in America, so it won't be as 15 as you're expecting. But as well as Batman stuff, we've also got some Oscar things on the way. We're going to be coming to a video this Wednesday for Don't Look Up.
Starting strong on the Oscar films, right?
Yeah. Well, I thought in December I watched it and I was like, I'm not gonna. So I was like, this isn't gonna get nominated. We don't have to cover this, and it was. So I'll be revisiting that. That'll be me this Wednesday, and tomorrow there's going to be a review for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. And comment on that video if your Cineworld took it out after less than a week, because mine did, but I was able to see it. So that video is going to be then. But yeah, it's Oscar season. March 27th is the day. We do a live stream every year on Oscar year. Me, you, and Tate. We've got our predictions video up. We've got ways for you to get involved. We have a whole game scoring system on the night to make it a little bit funner. So if you do like your Oscar films, I'll end this like I did of Uncharted. This won't be nominated for Oscars next year. Oh God, maybe this could be nominated for a Razzie. Actually, I'm going to guarantee you right now, Gal Gadot Razzie 2023 for Death on the Nile will get a nomination. So that's a little tease. We have a comment from Carl. It's the superb Owl Night today, for you What We Do in the Shadows fans that know that reference. We haven't fully discussed it yet. There's been some form of discussion, but the Super Bowl is something I was going to speak to Chris about after this video. I would say turn on notifications on YouTube on the off chance any videos do go up. It will be very late in the night. I'm always awake when the Super Bowl's on. I don't watch American football. I despise American football, but I like film trailers. So I always have to kind of be there to a point. So
there's going to be some big ones as well. A big talking point,
certainly, big
following a particular Vanity Fair article, which is I've got opinions on. I think we're getting a trailer for that, amongst many other things. We'll probably have some kind of coverage on it, whether it's one video kind of talking about all of them, or if we do individual ones, just hit the bell icon, notifications, best way.
And social media, because if we need to announce, we might be asleep. You know, American football, for some stupid reason, goes on for like 4 hours. They have like an hour halftime show. That's not normal. So, you know, if we're asleep, there might be something tomorrow and it might be on our social media. So, as usual, Carl, I know you're active on our social medias, but if you people are at home, obviously, you know, follow us on Twitter. Everything is in the link in the description below to do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Superb Owl. If you don't know what that means, go and find the episode of What We Do in the Shadows. You won't be disappointed. Rick come by Martin. There's no BBC Radio on YouTube from the great cast. Jim Broadbent. Very interesting. Jim Broadbent.
He's just great. Yeah. National treasure, as you mentioned. Yeah.
But that's going to round out tonight's video. I'm going to thank everybody for watching as always. Didn't expect it to go this long, but it's been a fun discussion. Lots of CGI things and all that kind of stuff. And I guess we'll see you on the next one. So do join us then. And be sure to obviously do all that other stuff. And thank you for watching.
See you guys.